Well, good morning. Good morning. I'm meteorologist Chita. I'm, of course, joined by Tim Pandajis, our midday evening meteorologist. And now, of course, today we are watching and tracking Hurricane Ida, which has just made landfall near Port Fourchon, if you're familiar with the Louisiana coastline. An official mark of 11:55, a little ahead of the forecasted track just before the lunchtime hour.
Yeah, we talked about that. It looked like it would be a little bit on the earlier side despite its forward motion slowing down slightly, but it roared ashore 150 mile per hour winds, category 4. We had thought maybe it would intensify a little bit, and it still can because it's very swampy where it made landfall, but 150.
You know, and because of that northerly track, I think because Grand Isle is just east of that, maybe that's why it touched down just a little ahead of time. So here's Grand Isle. Maybe if it had to wobble a little bit more further east, it could have been just after the lunchtime hour.
Right. And if you're wondering what the definition is actually of a landfall, it's when the center of the circulation intersects with the coastline, and that's exactly what's occurring right here. You can see a cleared out eye. In fact, the sun may even be shining in this area with the center of the eye clearing on out. The strongest winds just outside moving into Grand Isle. Those winds are pushing due north, and that is driving the storm surge significantly higher up through Grand Isle.
Originally forecasted maybe upwards of 10 or 12 feet. We'll have to wait and see some of the latest reports that are coming in. But we do have official landfall. And remember, just north of Grand Isle, that's where New Orleans is. And so we're waiting to see all of the bands, exactly how much they are expected to impact New Orleans at this point. And then just how many people are going to be in the way of the direct path of this. It's expected to stay just to the west of New Orleans. But I know that it's going to come really close.
And at this point in time in a storm's evolution, landfall usually signifies the starting of the end. It starts to deteriorate, but with this particular instance, southeastern Louisiana, swampy, marshy, it still maintains heat energy in those swamp waters. So we may see it maintain its intensity a little while longer than you normally would see anywhere else.
I know. So many people right now bracing for well over 100-mile plus winds, up to 110, even in places like New Orleans, not taking a direct impact, but as the hurricane makes its way northward.
11 a.m. advisory just came down, and that included the landfall location and timing. Still maintaining the wind speeds at 150, 930 millibar low. That looks to be the lowest, although Hurricane Hunter aircraft did find slightly lower, but splitting hairs at this point.
Yes. Okay, we were talking about how already this year we have been off to a hot start for hurricane season. We're not even in the peak of it. September the 10th is, but we've already had 3 different storms. So, of course, now we're tracking Ida here, but you can take it from Claudette, Danny, Elsa, Fred, Henri. That was the last one, and now here we are in Ida. But it's been already a really, really hot season.
Yeah, and we've only had 9 named storms, 6 of them making landfall in the continental U.S. Ida is the first hurricane. Elsa was a hurricane, but not at landfall as it moved into the Florida Panhandle. Although Henri, never mind, was a category
Cat 1.
Okay,
right.
So I take that back. Ida's the second hurricane.
But still, second hurricane just so far with only 9.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what's interesting, too, about August 29th, of course, recent history tells us, well, even more recent history was just this last 20 years. August 29th has not been a good day for southeastern Louisiana. 3 separate hurricanes making landfall on the 29th, Ida being the third. We had Isaac in 2012 and Katrina, of course, in 2005, that benchmark storm that Ida, once all is said and done, could come close to rivaling.
And if you go back just for a second, I did want to show, in case you were wanting to compare, and that's okay, the track of Katrina and Ida, a little bit different, but in the same vicinity. So here's Katrina. I know.
We're just bouncing all over the place with the graphics.
But it was slightly different, even though it's in the same vicinity.
Right.
It was just slightly further to the east. So we will see some of the impacts from New Orleans. Of course, all the updates, the upgrades that they did after Katrina in 2005. But because it's just a little further west, we'll see some of the impact.
Gosh, we're bouncing all over the place. I'm sorry.
Oh no, here we go. And look at that eye starting to close right when it makes landfall.
And there was some talk too of it trying to undergo an eye wall replacement cycle. And we had talked for the past few days, if that was to occur right up around landfall, that should briefly weaken it. And because after an eye wall replacement cycle happens, it does broaden the wind field and eventually intensifies the storm. But now that it's moving away from its fuel source, that shouldn't happen.
And you were talking about that with Katrina,
right?
Which happened. And so it was such a broad area where in this instance, it's a little more tightly compact.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting looking storm. And that eye now moving over land right now near Grand Isle, moving north and inland. And eventually the strongest of the winds are going to move on towards New Orleans.
But it'll be interesting with this track. So as it continues to the north, it'll be just how close it gets to New Orleans, and so many people waiting to see some of the wind speeds that they're going to be impacted with, how much rainfall that they could be picking up. You know, we've been learning how sometimes we don't really get a good estimate as it's currently falling. So we'll have to wait kind of for this to evolve.
Yeah, for sure. And then satellite imagery here, visible, showed that eye a little bit more clear here, just up to landfall. Looks like it's clouding over a little bit. That could be a symptom of the eye wall replacement cycle there occurring just at landfall. But I mean, just very interesting, well-defined storm. And if we even go back to the infrared imagery here, we talked about earlier in our video how the storm itself was looking and taking on that annular hurricane look. It's that eye with that very large area of convection, that very thick area that gives it that buzzsaw look or that tire rolling on through. And I think that's what we are seeing here with that storm.
Oh, yeah. And you can tell, I mean, just even with the satellite, I mean, now, of course, the sun fully up, so we're not seeing it quite as much as we did overnight, but as it closes in shore, you see how that eye is now starting to close on in.
Yeah, another characteristic of an annular hurricane is a rather condensed or not as widespread precipitation shield. Surely a ton of heavy rain here off to the northeast side, but you go just north of Lake Pontchartrain, just some scattered squalls moving on through there. So as this builds northwards, we'll see all that heavy rain spread inland too.
I know, and that's where millions of people are going to be in its path over about the next 24 hours.
Right.
So we'll see exactly if this takes more of, you know, a direct north, and that'll really impact as far as the wind event with so many people who are just trying to hunker down and ride it out. But again, there it is. So we will see just how closely it decides to get either way from home. Houma, though, is expected to take a direct path under the eye. So either way, they're going to be dealing with winds well above 100 miles per hour.
Absolutely. And it's a rather long duration event, moving to the northwest at 13 miles an hour, but it's going to take its time getting to the I-10 corridor. Probably by this evening it'll be there. So it's going to be windy, rainy, storm surge, flooding is going to be the biggest threat here as we go through the next couple of hours in terms of Ida progressing north and inland, away from the open waters that have been like jet fuel for this system over the past couple of days.
Incredible to see how rapidly it did intensify from yesterday, even this morning with the pressure dropping at 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. update, really through about 9 o'clock. And then we kind of stayed steady, I believe, since about 9, 10 a.m. this morning.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's the latest here. Landfall occurred at 11:55. Actually, here's what we really wanted to talk about. In fact, Chita, if you could draw on there the newer number. So this is radar velocities, and we're getting the radar out of New Orleans right now. And what this is, it's the radar beam shooting on out, but instead of showing us where the precipitation is, it shows us the movement of the air molecules, the wind speeds. So when you're seeing shades of green, that is wind moving in the direction towards the radar site. The red is away, and you can certainly pick out where the circulation is. You have got that large overall spin in the atmosphere. But just on the east-northeast side, there are some shades of white there, and that actually exceeds our color table. And Chita's drawing on some of the wind speeds depicted by radar here, up and over 140 miles per hour.
Incredible.
Yeah, and there was actually indications that there were dual eye walls, one on the inner and one on the outside, and that's also possibly a symptom of an eye wall replacement cycle. The inner eye wall collapses, the outer eye wall builds on in and replaces it, but both is a dual areas of extremely strong winds, 140 miles an hour.
Unbelievable.
That's a pretty good elevation off the ground, but certainly some of that is mixing to the ground at least over 120 miles an hour.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to see if I could get one more maybe observation where we could see something. No, they're all coming at, which is incredible, over 140 miles per hour. I believe earlier today, we saw one peak of 150?
Yeah, so just in the last hour.
So
maybe that's that inner eye wall not getting as strong in the outer one going to push on in and replace it. But storm surge, Chita, is still
Yes.
that main concern there, huh?
Yeah, that's right. So all the areas that you see shaded in red, those are the 12+ foot storms, and you can just see how populated that is. And then from the orange, and it works its way. But what was interesting to me, even looking at from Houma, and of course a lot of eyes here on New Orleans as you see how far this is going to extend, is just that the entire area. So rain, storm surge, and then the wind event that we've been talking about. And that's when it's going to be potentially catastrophic. I mean, devastating for this area and damage throughout the entire area. But we'll kind of have to wait over the next 24 hours. I think probably by after tomorrow morning, that's when, you know, the city officials, we've been hearing some of the press conferences, they'll be able to go out, survey some of the damage that they're going to see and kind of let residents know when it's safe to go back outside of their homes. But all of these people are hunkering down, or they've all been evacuated.
Right.
And I know a lot of people right now here in Houston are paying attention to the local forecast, and of course for Louisiana as well.
And they'll be returning to a different landscape.
Oh,
you know,
completely.
things will be changed here. And what's interesting with technology now is that there are tons of cameras set up all over this area that's going to be inundated, and they're satellite linked and battery backed up, so that they can see what happens with the progression of the storm surge and see what conditions are like without actually having to physically be there, be in the safety of someplace not being impacted. But I saw cameras all over the place here that are showing the damage rolling in on those higher ocean waters. It's crazy to see.
Crazy to see. It is the way we have set things up now that we can see that, so it doesn't actually take a person live holding that camera to be able to get that video, because at some point, you know, it's not safe for them. And a lot of people have had to take shelter, even from a media perspective, not even to be able to show or ask or show what's going on, just because it just becomes too unsafe.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the rainfall too. So you've got the storm surge flooding driven by the winds in the ocean, and then you've got freshwater flooding on the order of 10 to 15 inches, maybe locally higher in some of these bands that set on up and just keep pivoting in off the ocean. Could drop a ton of rainfall here, and that is going to spread inland. Once the wind threat dies down, it's not over with. There's a ton of moisture here that's going to have to just rain itself out.
Yeah, look at that. Even expected to still remain as, a major to a Cat 2, and even in getting into tomorrow morning, I mean, we're still talking tropical storm force conditions and the amount of rain. We know locally how it is to have those rain bands or some of that training that can evolve. So even if the forecast calls for so much rain, it can develop within some of those bands a completely different story. So we're just going to have to see where it falls in more densely populated areas where, there's a lot of concrete, or if it's more over the marshlands. And so we'll have to see exactly where some of this rain plays out. We're just hoping for the best and hoping everyone that was supposed to evacuate, because this forecast has played out as it was supposed to. So hopefully everybody did heed all the warnings.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot more going on out in the tropics. We are about 2.5 weeks out from the peak of the season, and activity's ramping on up. In fact, there's a wave coming off the coast of Africa that's got a 70, in fact, I didn't update this, but it's up to 80% within the next 5 days. And we've got more names there. We've got Julian today. TV10 is now Julian. We've got Kate probably, that's going to be 11. We've got Ida out there, and we'll probably see Larry or Mindy here too in the next couple days.
That's right. So the high here, a lot of these are going to continue to try to stay in the Atlantic Basin, but just like what we've seen, easily when they take that southerly trek. So you can't rule anything out. Over the next 3 weeks, hurricane season does peak September the 10th, so we have to keep our guard up. As these continue to come just right off the coast of Africa. All the conditions are becoming more favorable to see this heighten even more.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the latest with Ida. It has made landfall. Even though it is over land now, the threat is not gone. Wind threat's still there. Storm surge is rolling in as we speak. And, of course, the heavy rainfall, too.
I know. This is going to be something that we're going to monitor really closely throughout the day-to-day. We have updates all throughout the day-to-day. If you have friends or family who have come to Houston, or if you're watching for them, and you're trying to, communicate with them, just try to take a deep breath. We're going to continue to update you when we can, when we get new information. Addison Green and our chief meteorologist, David Paul, they're going to be in really soon. And so the more information we have, of course, we'll pass that on to you.
Absolutely. So if you're in the path of this storm as it moves forward, stay safe, heed the warnings of local officials, and we'll try to keep you updated as best we possibly can.